automation will make you 10 times more comfortable.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. May need to cut this class. May need to end a little early tonight, as I'm not feeling particularly well this week. Kind of fighting off a cold. So just bear with me if I'm a little more sluggish than usual. If you have further questions, I'll be able to make time over the weekend to meet with people. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. But yeah, if in lieu of really spending one-on-one time with everybody tonight, if you want to meet with me again, just shoot me an email and let's schedule a time for over the weekend or sometime early next week. Okay. So let's start with today's lesson. We're going to be talking about forms, as well as form validation, what that means. And we're going to do a top level overview of AJAX. AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And basically, it's the protocol that allows individual portions of a page to refresh themselves or update themselves without the entire page having to reload every time. So what is a form? Simply put, a form is a section of an HTML document where users can enter in data and submit it so that it gets sent somewhere. That's usually going to be sent to a server. You can think, for example, basic login. You have a field for username or email, a text input. You have a field for password, and you have a button that you submit. That information gets sent to a server. If the password is correct, the page logs you in. If it's not, it tells you that was an incorrect password, try again. That is an example, that is an extremely ubiquitous example of a place where a form is going to be used. What kind of things can you create inputs for? There's all different kinds of inputs. Basically, if there is a distinct data type, there's probably at least one input that's there to handle it. So we can create text boxes by just setting the type to text, number boxes by setting the type to number, check boxes where we pick true, false, radio buttons being where you select one out of a group of usually three or more items, or two or more, I guess. Date pickers, etc. All of those different kinds of input widgets are all the same input element with a different type specified. So if you want to see what all of the types are, let's just go. Input types. Okay. So we have color pickers, date or date time, specifically local, email, file uploads, all the telephone numbers, all different sorts. So some of you may have run across the name attribute for HTML elements before. This is where that comes into play. We use the name attribute of the input element to set the name of this field in the data that gets sent to the server. So if your input has a name, if the name attribute on your input says message and the value is hello, or the user either specified through the value here, or whether your user types in hello, when it gets submitted, what you'll get is essentially a structure that looks similar to this, where you have message is kind of the key that and the value is the value of the field. Now, when an input is full of data, after when you've typed into when you've typed, say you've input your email into the login field, we refer to that information as its value, the value of that input. So we can predefine that value using the value attribute, as you saw here. But some inputs support what we call placeholder text. There is an attribute specifically called placeholder that we use to put in what we want that we use to specify what the placeholder text should be, and that text does not affect the value of the input at all. Excuse me. Now, one thing that is standard practice is to check the form for any errors before our user can submit a form. This prevents malformed data from reaching the server, or from going to wherever it goes. And this process of checking the form for mistakes is called form validation. We use JavaScript to check each field of the form for errors before we submit, and we can prevent submission, and that way we can prevent a form from being submitted if it's missing data or if there's incorrect data. We do this using the protocol called AJAX, or rather by default, forms will, the default behavior of a web form is to either refresh the page, the entire page, or redirect to a new page whenever they're submitted. But if we don't want that to happen, if we want to just sort of, submit a form and stay on the same page, or we want to decouple the submission of the form from redirecting or refreshing the page that we're on, we can submit it asynchronously using JavaScript, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Even though the name still says XML, we actually are more likely than not going to be sending JSON information back and forth. The XML in the name is that's what we used to use, but that's kind of outdated now, but the name stuck. So we can use these kind of things to put together a simple mailer form. So here's the kind of thing that we can. So I have a form here. This is set up to send emails to my, yep, this is set up to send emails to my Pratt email inbox. So, first off, let's check out the markup. So, excuse me. So I have a form here. Let me do this. You can all see the, can you see the browser developer tools?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So all of this stuff is inside the form. A form should be a self-contained thing. So now inside that, I have inputs for first name, last name, email, and then a big text area for the content of the email. So if I write and submit, notice how I never got navigated away from this page. And also, there's the well, take my word for it. The here, I'll turn off the virtual background for this. Just a sec. Yeah, so I got it sent the message over. Now, I do have, so let's take another look at the specific markup that I have in place here. Not only do I have an input, but notice that this is also, notice that there is a label associated with each of the input fields. This is actually, this functionality, look what happens when I click on each label. See how it highlights the border around each field, as if I were clicking the field itself. That's because labels, the label element has extended functionality as long as you link it by as long as you link it to an input. So if an input's name is equal to F name, and your label, you want to associate it with that label, you use for and it shares the name. Actually, wait, hang on a second. I'm having a moment of just a slight moment of fogginess where I can't remember whether it's the whether that connects to the ID or the name. So just a second. The label. Attribute. Okay, it's the ID. Usually, okay, so for anything that, so if I want to associate the label with this input, I have to make sure that the label's for attribute matches this input's ID. This gets more, this can get pretty, that functionality can get really advanced. You can, if you're trying to say build custom elements, you can use the connection between the label and the label and its input to do what's called masking that input, but pull its functionality into something else. But that's well beyond the scope of everything that we're going to deal with here. So I was able to successfully send myself an email when I filled everything out. But so where does the JavaScript come into this? Let's take a look. So the first thing that I want to do is just go through all the fields and do a very, very, very simple check, which is just to make sure that just make sure that none of the fields are empty. We can get into more complex forms of validation, checking how things are spelled, checking how things are formatted. But for now, what we're going to do is this. We're just going to we're going to first notice that I'm selecting the entire form. And on the submit event, I am firing off a function. If I take out this event.prevent default, check out what happens as soon as I hit submit. See how the page refreshed? And see how there's a bunch of stuff up here? That's what forms want to do by default. So we prevent them from doing that. We go through, then I'm selecting all of the inputs inside the mailer and the text area inside the mailer. jQuery provides us an easy function for iterating over over big lists of complex objects. So we have this each method. And so for every single one of these it finds, starting with the first, it's going to get its value and stash it as a variable. Change this to let. Let's just do all of these. We go so for each of the inputs and for the text area, we get its value. If it doesn't exist, or so we can check multiple conditions at the same time a couple of different ways. If I put 2 ampersands, that would be this must be true and this must be true in order for this condition to work. But I have 2 pipes. This is the or statement. So if there's not a value at all, or if there is a value, but it's just an empty string, or tell you what, let's add one more. If val equals just a space, then we add the class invalid. So we iterate through each of the 1, 2, 3, 4 fields in our form. We check to see if there's a value in it that's not an empty string or a space. But if that is the case, if there's no value, or if the value is an empty string, or if the value is just a space, we mark that field as invalid. Then we log to the console how many things we have marked invalid. And if it's more than 0, we stop execution of the function right there. That's what this, that's one of the things, one of the functions of the return statement, is we can use it to just end execution of a function. And then none of the rest of this stuff happens. It just stops right here. So Let's look at that in the let's look at that in the source field here. So I've dropped a breakpoint. So we're right here now. So, oh wait, right, no, I need to add the, oh, okay, whoops, let's see what I did. Can anybody else see what I did? I don't expect that you would actually, honestly. I typed one equal sign, which is for setting values. If you want to compare values, you have to type two equal signs. So now this will work. So first, we prevent default execution of the event. We iterate over all four of these fields. And we so we iterate over all the fields, and we log to the console how many of these are marked invalid. Notice the red borders. I added the if I look here, if I go back to the elements, notice that they all have that invalid class added. And I have in my I have it in my CSS. That I have a class. Yeah, here we go. I have a class definition for input invalid and text area invalid that sets the border to be 3 pixel solid red. So then, continuing through, we simply return and stop. So we've stopped execution. So we've stopped this form from actually submitting any data anywhere. So now, as I go back into the form, and it's, so now I've had some kind of like an alert that, or I've made my user aware that these fields need to be corrected. So I'm going to assume that every time my user selects the field, if it's been marked invalid, they're coming in to correct it. So I can bind an event to when the user clicks on that field, and then I can remove the invalid class. That's what's happening here. The event, there are two events with respect that you should think about, or that you should know of with respect to form elements. There's the focus element, which is when the user selects an element. So I just focused this. So I just focused an element on I just focused on the first name field. There's also the blur event, which is the opposite, when a field loses focus or when a field it becomes deselected. So I blurred the first name field and focused the last name field here. So whenever all I'm doing here, these console log statements are just here to tell you whether you focused or blurred the field. The real meat functionality here, the real meat of the functionality is that if your field has the class invalid, you remove that class. And this is starting to appear kind of like the sort of UX that you've experienced in the wild, I'm certain. This kind of UX is very common these days, and it's fairly simple conceptually to implement. We have not approached the AJAX layer of this yet, so let's do that, because that's where it gets a little more complicated.
Quick question. Sorry if I missed this. Where does this information go? Like, where is it stored?
That's exactly what I'm about to do. So, when the field is submitted, it goes to, when the field is submitted, it has to go to a server somewhere. I've set up a little backend server app that sends emails. So this is, you don't need to worry about all this stuff. But you're going to do, what you're going to be working with is some form of something called an API, or application programming interface. An API is basically a set of input and output commands that sits on top of a server, so that you can, so that the client can sort of connect with it in a simplified manner, and it's also a more secure manner as well, because it allows you to build in things like authentication checks and that sort of thing. In this case, the API that I'm pointing at is just hosted in the same file. So, or hosted here in the same project. Now, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, because it's more advanced than we're going to necessarily need to go over the course of this class. But there are basically, anytime we send a request to an API, we need to tell it what type of request it is. If we are retrieving data from a server, the post is a GET. If we are sending information to a server, the type is POST. If we are, and those are the most basic ones that you'll run into. We don't really need to go much further than that for today's sake. But, and you don't need to worry too much about sort of what this is doing. We're just restructuring this just restructures the data in the array, so that it, or the data from the form, to fit a data structure that the server wants to see. So basically, what I do is so result field is where I output text saying either this did or didn't work. And then I take the form, I process the data. I add that loading class, which turns on the spinner. If I go to so when the form has the loading class, I hide everything inside it and show the spinner, which is just a CSS animation. So then I send my requests out to the server, and it will send a response. This AJAX method is a jQuery specific method that you may that makes working with these kinds of requests much easier. And we can get more into sort of how we want to handle these responses, but all we're really concerned about from the standpoint of simplicity is what happens if it works and what happens if it doesn't work, based on the response we get from the server. So if everything worked fine, we remove the loading class, and we put text in the field that says, thanks for your message. If anything went wrong, we add an error class, and we put the contents of the error message into the text field. So that's how we get from there to, and the point of things happening, this is where the term asynchronous comes into place, because we don't necessarily know predictably how long this action will take. We have to toss it out there, or we have to make the request, and then we have to wait an unspecified amount of time for the response to come back. So instead of things being synchronous, that is locked to certain events in time, this is asynchronous. We just say, do this to start it, and then when we get some feedback, do this to end it for any arbitrary length of time. And then what we end up with so when I submit, we select the result field just to prepare. We pull the form data in and we process it. And so then we ended up with a JavaScript object that looks like this. That's, by the way, JSON stands for, .json is a file type that you will see out in the wild. That stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And basically what it allows you to do is store JavaScript data independently of being part of like a JavaScript, a full JavaScript file. So then we add the loading class. So here I've hidden all the fields and I show the CSS spinner. So now that data gets sent to this URL via the post message, and we wait to see what happens on the once it completes. We're either going to get a success or we're going to get an error. Well, let's see what happens. It went through successfully. So I just sent myself another email. Now, if you you're welcome to use this. You're welcome to use this exact form if you'd like. You can just remix this project, and you'll need to make an account on a site called Mailgun. But if you want to use it, I can walk you through it. And then you can customize the CSS and make it look however you like, but you can keep all of the JavaScript functionality that I've written. If you don't want to bother with that amount of setup, let's talk a little bit about something somewhat simpler. Let's talk about Mailto links. So say I don't really care about going as far as, you know, building out a whole custom form for somebody to send me their email. I just want a link that points at my email address. That's dead simple. I can just use a standard anchor and set the href equal to mailto : and my email address. Now, watch. Sorry, I need to share my whole desktop for this to work. Now, watch what happens. Let me kill that purple background. That looks gross. Okay. So now, and this is functionality you've definitely seen. If I click this, it opens up my computer's email client. And that's just built in. If I were on my phone, it would pop me right over to just, you know, the mail app on my phone. Now, say, you know how if you go on like Craigslist, let's say, I don't know. Let's just go to, oh, something I'm, you know, near and dear to my heart. Now, when I click the button to email on here, if I click reply, I have these webmail links. If I just click reply by email, it'll open up my default, my computer's email client, my computer's built-in email software, or whatever the default email software on the computer is. But it's actually really easy to code links that point straight to Gmail, Yahoo, or Hotmail, or Outlook, Hotmail, or Windows Live. If you want to write if you want a Mailto link that points to Gmail, your href can be this. To, in this case, would be kfhone at or kgeorgian@pratt.edu. And I can even define a subject and a body if I want to. I can say, I don't know, you know, it's a subject line. And I can specify a body of the email as well. So if I click this, it popped me over to Gmail and plugged in the subject that I had specified and the body that I had specified. You can also do this with Outlook, which will go to all the Microsoft emails. So this one's formatted a little differently, not quite as pretty looking. And then we can send email, and then we can send Yahoo web links. By the way, those same, if I want to specify a subject, I can do it here. I can do # subject equals and body equals. But I can specify these here in my Mailto. But last but not least, Yahoo Mail. These are the three most popular. These tend to be these are the three most popular webmail clients, at least as of the time of the writing of the Stack Overflow answer, which that I'm looking at, which is from 2017. But this should still be pretty accurate. So from Yahoo, it goes to so if I had accounts on Yahoo Mail or Outlook, I could send from those just by clicking these links. So that's really the entire lesson and code demo for today. I would have spent more of this class doing I intended to spend more of this class doing one-on-one time with you, but again, apologies, I'm just not feeling up to it today. But you're free to use as little or as much of this as you want. Just remix the project. It's in the, if you go to our team page, it's in, it is in the class example playlist. Week 10 contact form at the bottom. And the all the code for the mailing for to use the mailer form is in there, or if that's too much and you don't want to get quite that detailed, you can just use those webmail2 links. Okay, so thanks for bearing with me today as I'm not firing on all cylinders, but shoot me an email. Let's schedule a time to do another round of one-on-ones, or And then from here on out, all we have, we're not going to do any new material next week. It'll just be a lab class. So I can answer extended questions that you might have. I can dedicate one-on-one time, and it'll just basically be in-class working time on the project themselves.
Sorry, Carl. So when you say like you can use little or as much, do you mean like this material in our project or like a separate homework?
No, this material in your project.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you want to include this contact form in your web page, you are welcome to do so. And I can walk you through instructions on getting it set up if you choose you want to do that. And all the only things you'll have to edit are like a little bit of CSS and some name and password fields. If you want to use those mail links or something like that, you're welcome to use those as well. Okay, well, on that note, I'm going to go make myself another cup of tea. And I will talk to you all soon. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Have a good
Good night.
night.